Haven't had a good opportunity to grease the tangent drive in a good minute, and with the recent announcement of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3+4, I have a couple things I'd like to say about it, so let's just get right into it. First of all, before I exceed my tangent drive, no, this has nothing to do with the fact that the developers are basically shilling Doomslayer into the game, even though that Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3, on the PC version at least, had Doom Guy, albeit the Quake 3 Arena model, as a playable character. Of course, you had to put in the all weapons cheat code to access him, but it's a pretty cool little Easter egg, as the kids call it these days, even though the PC port was handled by Gearbox. Yes, the same Gearbox that butchered Halo and is known for Borderlands and nothing else, but that's another story. I'm pretty certain that him and the Revenant are going to be exclusive to Xbox, considering that the whole Bethesda being acquired by Microsoft means that a once well-known series that's basically exclusive to PC, due to the fact that a lot of the console ports are just kind of shit, but that doesn't mean that exclusivity didn't mean anything, but not going to really get into that. The fact that the skateboarding game featuring Doomslayer and the Revenant, because of the meme that people use, I guess, and color me surprised if they didn't include the fucking Duke skin, but I'll digress. That skateboarding game is going to be coming out long after Doom Dark Ages, and considering how people glazed up the first two games, how much you want to bet these people actually care about this sort of thing? It's like when Metal Gear Solid 2 Substance came with some sort of skateboarding demo that Konami also had a hand in making. If you think this rant is going to be primarily focused on Doomslayer, you'd be completely in the wrong, and I hope that you conjure something for simply assuming, but get mad at others for doing exactly that. I don't care about this game having Doomslayer when there's already a bunch of other problems this game has conjured, alright? Now, let's get into the real meat and potatoes of this rant. The news that came out after the fact that with Doomslayer is that Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3+4 is going back to basics, i.e. legitimate regression, in that the game is not going to feature the career mode that was made standard ever since Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4. I'll break it down to you non-Tony Hawk's Pro Skating fans out there, I guess. In Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1, 2, and 3, the career mode was essentially a 2-minute run that you can repeat in attempts to complete various goals, whether they be getting a certain score, finding a hidden tape, or secret, depending on how you want to look at it. One tells you to go find it, the other tells you this is where it is, go find it, collecting the skate letters, and even having other miscellaneous goals that involves finding or collecting 5 things, and even some goals which will light unlock different parts of an area or some shit. This was the main standard for at least the first 3 games, and ever since Tony Hawk's Underground and the Game Boy Advance of all things, having it set to be a side mode alongside the career mode or story mode, whatever you want to call it. And even American Wasteland had a co-op version of this, while funny enough, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4 on the Game Boy Advance actually had a competitive version of this. And also, funny enough, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 on the Game Boy Advance had a spin on the mode, which not only allowed you to relive the experience, but being given 5 minutes to complete all the goals in one run. I'm not against the formula entirely, even though every single Pro Skater game, including the objectively better Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2X, which was handled by Treyarch, which is surprising to say the least, not only it being much more content-packed with having 4-player split screen, you have to do this mode with every single skater just to get the goods, i.e. the cheats and shit, just got tiring after a while. And it was especially made apparent with Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and the Game Boy Advance, where they made you do this shit twice, despite there only being 6 levels. Yes, I know a lot of these handheld Pro Skater games in the Game Boy Advance may not be seen as good, but I don't give a shit. I grew up with them, and I really like them. Skateland can fuck off, though. That's like the equivalent of modern day, we just gave up and don't care about games anymore. Just ship it, who cares? They'll glaze it anyway, and they probably do. Also, hashtag not my Mindy. In before, why not just get to the point, you fucking jackass? I have to elaborate this because in Pro Skater 4, they essentially combined the finding goals to do with the free skate, which is just basically playing around the level at your leisure while still having the single session, which is just 2 minutes to rack up a high score and whatnot. And the fact that they want to axe this obvious winning formula to the series and not just having it being a side mode, which Tony Hawk's Underground 2 and even American Wasteland once again had it as a side mode for those who just weren't happy with the story direction, just kind of baffles me. And even Underground 2, at the very least, let you choose what levels you want to go through if you want to get that fix, and unlike the older games, you only had to go through it twice at most. Since, unlocks didn't stack in Underground 2, which was immensely retarded. Almost every version of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4, whether it be the shitty PlayStation 1 port, and don't tell me that you actually like that shit, because there were just so many bullshit moments in there, it's not even funny. Hell, even recording footage for it, just to showcase the damn game, there are things in that version that you would never see in any other version. I hate to pull a Miss Sparrow, but it's damn true. And also the game just sucks in general. It's like if people who deliberately hated the upgrades that Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4 went, but wanted to keep that Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 aesthetic in. And no, I'm not kidding. But even as shitty as the PlayStation 1 port is, at least they kept in the career mode that was made standard on the 6th gen versions. Even if it's in the most downgraded way possible, the same formula is still there. You still have to go around finding the goals to do and shit, and you still played it as if it was the main version. It's just a watered down version, but it's still the same concept. It actually had Bam Margera in the game listed under other skaters for some reason, and is the only character in that game besides the midget clown person. I'm not really certain as to why. And at least had a unique level, the sewers, and even the Little Big World, which is kind of weird. This version sucks, but at least it retains what made Pro Skater 4 work, and it even has a park editor mode. Make of that what you will. So the fact that the developers basically want to pull what games like Streets of Rage 4 did, with it trying to take the best elements from 2, while also simultaneously fucking it up like how 3 did, except people hate 3, even the people who worked on Streets of Rage Remake. Except one has aged better than the other, and kind of reminds me of how I feel about Resident Evil 5. It still plays like shit, is outdated compared to Dead Space, but compared to 4 is a much better improvement and has much better replay value. I'm not trying to say that the game is good by any means, but I can at least acknowledge a game's improvements and all that fun stuff. I don't see that with Pro Skater 3 plus 4. Especially since the game could have had a career mode in the same vein that even Pro Skater 5 did. Even though people literally trashed in the game just because it had glitches. Kind of like a certain video game that people will unironically glaze even after nearly damn 20 years later to shit. That's going to be a fucking fun time. And just the fact that they're going back to basics because of incompetence is anything but surprising to me. I don't know why people think this is defensible in any capacity. Like, just imagine if other remakes and remasters did the same thing. I mean, it's never happened before. Cutting out content and replacing it with something just as shittier. Even in the one game, I'd say this is somewhat defensible with JoJo's Bizarre Adventure All-Star Battle Royale. Even though the game's original story was shit, with it barely being presentable, what was taken away gave a lot more, so I'm okay with it, even though, yes, it would have been nice to have it, but sometimes you just have to take the good with the bad. There is no taking the good this time, because they're literally cutting off a core part of what made Pro Skater so fun, and nothing to compensate with it. The bonus with something like Underground 2 and the other games I mentioned had the classic mode as a side mode, but I doubt we're going to be getting anything with the side mode, if there's even going to be one at all. And the fact they want to charge so much money for this so-called remaster is ridiculous to me. But, people defend it, but we'll get into that later. I mentioned Bam Margera a while ago, and that is because, well, let's be honest. With the shit that he's been getting himself into, whether it be justified or otherwise, this one heinous action is unfortunately enough for developers to basically not bother having him be added into the game. And funny enough, also debuted in Pro Skater 3 and has become kind of a center focus in something like Tony Hawk's Underground 2. And I honestly have to say that's kind of dumb. Oh, but we get Bob Burnquist in Pro Skater 3, so it's totally worth it, you guys. No. Not the same thing, yo. I don't know how people are going to justify this either, because, oh, well, what he did was bad, so he should have consequences for it, when people will literally white knight the most stupidest of things, regardless in itself. But, you know, they're downright removing a character from a game because of issues that happened in the past, but unlike a lot of people, is actually trying to better himself, but the damage is already done, which is just kind of bullshit. Little bro should have taken the Kai Cenat lessons on how to get away with crimes, then he'd still be a celebrity. Ha 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 ha. Alright. So the devs seem to have taken a bit of lesson with doing what Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1+2 did, by attempting to recreate what Treyarch did, except they did it in a kind of shitty manner. And not to mention that they're trying to do it again here, while it could also possibly making a flop that could make Pro Skater 5 even worse than it already was. Even having DLC exclusive to one version of the game, which is still kind of surreal. I guess a lot of people like myself really like Pro Skater and will no doubt buy it. I mean, people are basically doing this with literally anything else. They know the game's a piece of shit. They know it's going to have some bullshit in it, but they're going to bend over and get it anyway. These people, at the very least, if they were smart about it, would buy it secondhand to keep their morals in check, or just pirate the fucking thing, and then nobody wins. I'm not going to really get into that specific argument because, you know, that's bad to mention, but, you know, Nintendo's the only company who will advocate such things because, you know, reasons, but whatever. I'm genuinely curious to how many people are actually going to defend this. Like, look, I love the Tony Hawk games, more or less Pro Skater 3 and 4, and the ones after that, except for Skateland, that can fuck off in more ways than one, because that game is just fucking terrible, like, actually fucking terrible. Even the final goal just makes no fucking sense whatsoever, and even TV Tropes perfectly describes it. It's just really shitty design. How hard is it to make a skateboarding game featuring a legend in the sport, and just actually have the charm that Neversoft once had? All that charm went into something like Ghosts, and now they're just forever shackled by Activision because they own the rights to some shit. Like, it's just fucking dumb. But guys, look, it's Doomslayer, so it has to be good. Even though Doom was never that good. Not that one. There you go. And even the sequel, and then the prequel, and people act like gaming is saved. I'm genuinely curious if this is gonna stir off a hive, like whenever I dare talk about Elden Ring or whatever game that people get their panties in knot, because God forbid I say it. I'll crap on Mortal Kombat 11 for having a really shitty story, but don't you dare diss my waifu from Elden Ring who looks blue and can turn into some sort of snake and gives you a fucking ring that is exactly the same shit as the Calamity Ring, with none of the benefits, even though it, in literally any other game of the sort, you could at the very least take massive damage, but also deal massive damage. It's like that one costume in Guacamelee if you were only to receive massive damage but deal none of the damage whatsoever. There's a reason why trade-offs exist, you fucking retards. But yeah, I'm gonna go back to shredding in Tony Hawk because I ain't got nothing better to do. And by shredding, I mean straight from the underground in Tony Hawk's Underdweller.